The program manager for Critical Conversations, an engine for contemporary art and art inquiry that's rooted in exchange between artists, arts writers, and cultural producers. It's my pleasure to be here this afternoon to kick off the 2023-24 lecture series with a talk by Aurora Tang. I'll let my colleague Colin Ives, the director of the Center for Art Research, introduce her properly in a couple of minutes. For now, I'd like to take a moment to recognize that the University of Oregon is located on Kalapuya Ilihi, the traditional homeland of the Kalapuya people. Following treaties between 1851 and 1855, Kalapuya people were dispossessed of their land by the United States government and forcibly removed to the coast reservations in western Oregon. Today, descendants are citizens of the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde community of Oregon and Confederated Tribes of the Siletz Indians of Oregon, and continue to make important contributions to their communities at the University of Oregon and across the lands we now refer to as Oregon, the United States, and the world. In acknowledging the original people of the land we occupy, we extend our respect to the indigenous people of Oregon and all other displaced indigenous people who call Oregon home. With today's talk and our collective activity, we recognize Oregon's first people as the past, present, and future stewards of this land, and we pledge our commitment to make ongoing efforts to center indigenous existence in the work we do. I'd also like to extend this commitment to people who may not have directly been impacted by settler colonialism on sites currently inhabited by the University of Oregon, yet have been systematically oppressed, denied access, and physically and psychologically abused for generations by the very structures and mechanisms that have afforded the University of Oregon and so many of our students, faculty, and staff opportunities to thrive. While I fully believe in the practice of acknowledging the land we occupy as agents of this institution, I'm increasingly uncomfortable with the ways that this may allow institutions to less urgently address historic issues caused by colonialism that are still present in the lived experience of individuals and communities. With this land acknowledgement, I'd also like to publicly acknowledge the toxic potentials that both institutional and individual virtue signaling may have on a range of people and groups. And I'd like to call attention to the responsibility those of us who benefit from a relationship to the University of Oregon and established structures of power have to continue to work beyond statements, to do the work to support people on their terms. Additionally, by acknowledging the land we occupy, I'd also like to propose a form of collective gratitude for the ability to be here today on this land, in the relative safety of this building, which benefits from a great deal of resources and freedoms that have allowed us all the privilege to assemble under the auspices of intellectual exchange and inquiry here today. Now, before handing this over to Colin, I'd like to tell you a little bit about Critical Conversations, a collaboration between the University of Oregon and the Ford Family Foundation, which are the co-sponsors of this event today. The Ford Family Foundation's visual arts program honors the foundation's late co-founder, Hallie Ford, and her lifelong interest in the arts by helping Oregon's most promising visual artists actively pursue their work. One element of the program is Critical Conversations, a collaboration between the foundation and the U of O that works in partnership with the Pacific Northwest College of Art at Willamette University and Reed College's Cooley Gallery. Critical Conversations is a nexus space for the work of artists and cultural producers that manifests as fertile medium through which exchange, collaboration, and new forms of inquiry are catalyzed. Organizing partners facilitate a year-round calendar of studio visits for Oregon artists by 3 prominent visiting curators or critics. We host related public lectures and other forms of engagement with these visitors and oversee a series of convenings that engage community participants around currents in society and the field. In addition to events like today, engagement is made accessible to broader audiences through a variety of platforms, including Critical Conversations annual publication, for which we gather content from a range of activities and commissioned writings around a theme. This program is such a gift to us, the University of Oregon, I think also to the state. It's a place where artists and cultural producers can exchange in ways that aren't about market or professional progress. I'd like to just close by acknowledging and thanking the people who represent our partner institutions and who together have brought the state of Oregon such an exceptional group of visionary curators and critics over the years. Thanks to Stephanie Snyder, who's out there watching us, director and curator of the Cooley Gallery at Reed College, Shauna Lipton, associate professor and chair of the MA in Critical Studies at PNCA, and Oregon artist Ralph Puget for all of your efforts and dedication to this program as advisory board members. Thank you to Yael Amir and Steph Littlebird for your vision and leadership as commissioning editors for our critical writing initiative. And thanks to Megan Atiyah, the senior advisor for the Ford Family Foundation's Visual Arts program, for your boundless partnership and support for all things related to Critical Conversations. I'd also like to give a big thanks, and I'm holding myself back from demanding that we have a standing ovation, to Laura Butler Hughes, the Critical Conversations program coordinator, for her essential help with more things than I have time to mention here. Additionally, I'd like to acknowledge the contributions made by my colleagues in the Department of Art, the Center for Art Research Director Colin Ives, and Center CFAR Program Manager Wendy Heldman, and to Tanaz Farsi for your continued dedication and support, as well as the unyielding support of our department head, Anya Kavarkis, School Director Laura Vandenberg, and the Dean of the College of Design, Adrian Parr. Now, after acknowledging where we are and how we got here, I'd like to hand it over to Colin to talk about where we're going to go.
Thank you so much.
Colin Ives.
Thanks, Brian, for those thoughtful, very thoughtful remarks. You've rendered me utterly unprepared. Thank you. Very nice. So as Brian said, I'm the director of CFAR, and I'm super excited to be partnering with Critical Conversations in bringing Aurora Tang in to the university. I also want to acknowledge Laura and Wendy Heldman's work on this. It wouldn't happen without you both. Aurora Tang and Ashley Stoll-Myers are curators in residence for the year with CFAR, and along with this lecture, they will be curating 3 two-person shows. So that's the kind of larger project that this is kind of one piece of. This project is called Solastalgia, the Climate Crisis and Countering a Sense of Powerlessness. Solastalgia is a term coined by the philosopher Glenn Albright to articulate a new form of emotional or existential crisis, distress that's caused by climate change. While it may not make sense to turn to art for practical solutions to the climate crisis, art is, at its core, agentic. And gaining a sense of agency may well be critical in our facing our new climate realities. The exhibits that Ashley and Aurora are working on are intended to explore the possible frameworks that art operates in regarding these questions. And this is a project that's also funded by the Ford Family Foundations through their exhibitions grant. Aurora Tang is a curator and researcher, often working in the intersections of contemporary art, architecture, and landscape studies. She has worked with the Center for Land Use Interpretation since 2009 and currently serves as its program director. This really makes her a perfect fit for this programming. As an independent curator, Aurora has organized recent exhibitions at MAK, Center for the Art and Architecture, MoCA Tucson, the Armory Center for the Arts. She's also worked with the nonprofit and research organizations, including the Getty Research Institute, the Getty Conservation Institute, and High Desert Test Sites. She's taught at schools including Otis College for the Art and Design and the University of Southern California. She is a recipient of the Andy Warhol Foundation. She is a recipient for an Andy Warhol Foundation curatorial research fellowship. Thank you, Aurora.
Okay, can everyone hear me okay? Great, thank you for the thumbs up. And thank you so much, Brian and Colin, Laura, Wendy, and all of those wonderful people who have helped make my visit here possible. It's, I just got to Eugene about an hour ago, but I've been in the state about a couple days, and it's been really lovely to be here. And of course, thank you all for being here too. And so today I'm going to speak about some independent projects I've organized as a curator, as well as some that were produced while employed at arts organizations, mainly the Center for Land Use Interpretation, where I've worked for almost 15 years now in some capacity. Afterwards, I mean, I'm going to try to speed through, and I'll try to read the room too. I can tend to talk too much, so feel free to give me signs if I'm just droning on for too long. But I'll try to keep track of nodding heads and stuff. So, but I'm happy to answer questions if there's time, or afterwards feel free to come up to me, and happy to talk about any of these things. So we'll jump right in. And so I'm going to start with some independent curatorial projects. So although I have been lucky enough to have kind of jobs that I like and allow me to explore creative projects, I can't do everything I want to do under my jobs. So I found it really important to maintain an independent curatorial practice. And so I often work with other small, mid-size, nonprofit, kind of what sometimes they call artist-centric organizations, or university museums are really wonderful. And this is a recent exhibition that was at Mocha Tucson in Arizona, and it's called Plein Air. And so this exhibition explores shifting ideas of Western landscape, painting, and field work. It kind of looks at traditional plein air painting, which typically involves painting outdoors in a single sitting to capture a vista and a certain quality of light, and takes that as a point of departure to consider the ways in which humans use, observe, record, and commune with the land. So this idea of plein air painting I'm looking at very broadly, and it's considered in the context of things like land surveying and settling, public and private space, multidisciplinary on-site research, and the embodied experience of just being there or wherever you are. And so outdoor painting from observation is approached as a form of ground truth, as bearing witness, a way to experience, process, and understand a range of physical landscapes and our relationship to them. And so this was a group exhibition with 7 artists, Susanna Batten, Esteban Cabeza de Baca, Iris Hu, KB Jones, Hilary Mushkin, Sterling Wells, and Paula Wilson. And I guess one of the things, I spend a lot of time outside, and this exhibition invitation kind of came about in the very early days of the pandemic, when a lot of us were turning to just going outside. It seemed like maybe the best place to be for a lot of us. And so that was part of that context. I also have been teaching field courses for art and architecture students. I think a lot about what it means to be present in various landscapes, whatever those may be, wherever you are. And was doing a meeting with a lot of artists who were also incorporating that, just getting out there and field work or getting out of their studios as part of their practice. And so one like really base criteria ended up being all of the artworks and artists in the show, their work literally involves painting or paint outdoors in this. So it's a very literal approach to plein air painting. And so I'll go into some of the works in this exhibition a bit more. But on the right, you see that painting by Esteban Cabeza de Vaca. And he is an artist who's based in New York City, but grew up in San Isidro near the US-Mexico border, and has a lot of family in the Southwest. And he often starts these landscape paintings painted outdoors from observation, pretty straight up plein air painting. But then layers them, brings them back to the studio and to create these portals through time and places that are linked to the artist's own lived experience. This painting is called How Mora, New Mexico Stopped Fracking, and it reflects on the 2015 banning of hydraulic fracturing in Mora, New Mexico, which is his paternal homeland. And so layers of paint are added and removed on top of that base level kind of landscape painting that he painted outdoors in front of the site. And then to kind of reveal this multi-dimensional portrait of a place, channeling its deep past and looking towards its future. And the viewer is then presented with a view from a cave's red rock wall, peering out into these snow-capped mountains, these verdant hills with flowing streams. And in it, he's really showing that Mora is an example of, you know, another future might be possible. And so I find it quite a kind of hopeful painting, actually. And then in the foreground, in that kind of casework, we have part of a project by the artist Hilary Mushkin, who has this ongoing project called Incendiary Traces, which often involves bringing groups of folks from all kinds of backgrounds, professional backgrounds, scientists, other artists, writers, out to kind of often contested landscapes, often militarized or surveilled places, to do plein air painting sessions. You know, these are often places where you can't bring a camera, or if you do, you raise suspicion. There's something about taking a photo that can be seen as quite invasive, actually, you know, or suspicious. And even though there are all these cameras pointing at you, probably watching what you're doing. And so I love this idea of taking a gesture, something that is seen and perceived as perhaps a hobbyist thing, or something that's harmless, just watercolor, plein air painting or drawing, and very low tech, and going out there as a way of documenting, recording a site as well. And so Hilary's been leading those activities for about 10 years. And what you see is actually part of a newer body of work called Survey to Surveillance that shows a link between the 19th century scientific land survey that the US government used to establish the border with Mexico, and then the database systems used to police it today, using often biometrics, things like companies like Palantir. And so that's kind of a glimpse of what you see there. And we'll zoom in. This is a work by Iris Urehu. And Iris often works in relation to people, plants, histories, practices, and environments, and uses paint, language, fiber, soil, and other organic matter to create these vibrant assemblages that trace networks within a landscape. The act of sourcing, making, and using botanical pigments, dyes, textiles, and other materials is integral to Hu's process. And she begins many of her works by literally going outside, often in, she lives near kind of the foothills of Los Angeles, and starts out by tracing the shadows of plants outdoors, and then incorporating other painted elements. Additional components, often handcrafted or sourced by Hu, include these artist frames, weavings, tanned fish skin, persimmon stained, netting, all kinds of things, dyed textiles, and locally sourced earth ceramics. This is a view of Susanna Batten's Leave No Trace series, which involves the artist's ongoing research into the U.S. Bureau of Land Management's standard environmental color chart. So this is a chart that the Bureau of Land Management, or BLM for short, has kind of devised for their staff to use internally. And you see those little color charts on the little shelf there. And those 9 paint colors have been approved for use on the agency's facilities, along with certain guidelines on selecting the appropriate color to paint a structure in order for it to best blend into the landscape. So this idea that paint can help minimize the visual impact of maybe something like infrastructure, a bathroom even, or a garbage can or something in the landscape on these public lands, federal lands. So Susanna has centered this presentation of it around these 3 video works in which she considers how paint can be used as a tool to mask human impact on the land, while also posing questions about the artist's own presence on site. So you see rumpled up those garments. Those are dyed uniforms that are dyed to match specific colors from that BLM color chart. And those are the colors. There are 3 different places. I think those are all BLM land in the Arizona area where the artist is based. And the artist went out in the field and selected the colors that matched to her, and found things like, one of them is a dumped microwave. People tend to trash public land sometimes. And one's a TV, a flat screen TV. And the artist dons these matching uniforms to go into the landscape and then paint over the TV or the microwave in this kind of absurdist gesture of like, leave no trace. This is just masking the, it's the superficial treatment of that. So it's that body of work. And this here, we have a still. I wish I could show you the whole video. It's not even very long, but it's a work by the artist Paula Wilson. It's called Salty and Fresh, and it references and challenges art historical tropes while calling attention to the act of seeing as well as being seen. So it's a short video that was shot on site in 2014, Virginia Key Beach in Miami, which was this historic colored-only beach. And it offers this restaging of a painting's creation myth, kind of like, think mayonnaise, kind of the picnic on the grass thing you've probably seen. In it, the artist, Paula Wilson, appears as this towering sea goddess who's yielding this like oversized artist palette and paintbrushes, and is painting these faces onto the nude posteriors of these living kind of architectural supports, evoking classical architecture and stuff. Meanwhile, there are these sunbathing picnickers looking on and capturing the scene through the mediated lens of their smartphone cameras. As the painted anthropomorphized vessels gaze back. So this show, it's kind of funny. I mean, this is a lovely work. I mean, yet I really, it's important for me, well, in this show in particular, that, to kind of, I think we're inundated by a lot of doom and gloom, especially around conversations about the land, because there can be really depressing aspects about it. But what I love about each of these artists is that they are providing this critical feedback about the landscape and our understanding of landscape in the West. Yet there is humor, there is joy, and there is fun. And I think Paula's work really exemplifies that, really pushing our ideas of what what we come to understand as painting and why, and kind of reclaiming kind of some of those origin stories perhaps, or rewriting them. And then so the exhibition actually traveled. It's at its second iteration, and now it's in Pasadena, California, at the Armory Center for the Arts, where it's on view till basically the end of the year. And I'll just go through it a little bit quickly here, but for me, it's hard. I mean, traveling exhibitions is it's wonderful because you get to spend even more time with the work and the ideas. But it's always a little more complicated than just kind of pack the work up, send it up, and plug and play. And because it's always dependent on, the context. Each institution is different, each space is different, and it's a different moment in time. And so this one, it was, it went up like maybe three years after like the first show was conceived. So some time had passed. And we also had the opportunity to, it was really fun to kind of revisit some of the ideas, also expand on some of the ideas of the original exhibition, and even include some works that didn't even exist at the time of the first exhibition. And so I'll just go through so you can see how, I'm happy to talk to anyone later about this organizing traveling exhibitions is a interesting thing that I feel like not that many people talk about, but it's a fun exercise, and I felt like it was such a luxury to be able to revisit this exhibition in this different context. So this is one, these are all same artists in the show, it's just sometimes there are more works, and this is just a view of Sterling Wells, a Pasadena-based artist who also kind of works in traditional plein air painting, but with a spin on it. And so while traditional plein air painting is often completed in a single sitting in order to capture a specific quality of light, Sterling Wells' observational watercolor paintings involve working at a single location, often a site of environmental, social, and cultural confluence for an extended period of time, embracing the shifts, the changes that can come from day to day. And also, while conventional landscape paintings often look out into the distance, for Wells, this is the colonizer's gaze, looking out. And so Sterling is interested in depicting the ground. In this work, which was painted over several days in March 2020 at the Arroyo Seco watershed in Los Angeles, Wells actually worked on site from a hole that he dug out, from which he worked, with the idea of getting his eye level close to the ground. And from that perspective, in his words, you can paint the words on the wrapper of a piece of litter in the foreground, as well as massive infrastructure in the distance. And so he also displayed it on this kind of easel assemblage created from objects found at the site, and giving the work kind of this sculptural presence in the gallery. And this is just a quick view of, I really like kind of thinking of exhibitions as also dialogues with the artists. And so for this one, you might recognize parts of Iris's work. Iris wanted to change things up. Didn't want to show the exact same thing, but it's this revisit. And so Iris actually added some additional works, moved some elements around. And I really like that, having that flexibility, that dialogue with the artist. And again, like that wall work we see didn't even exist when the Mocha Tucson show came up. And then we were also able to incorporate this vitrine work that was a way to, she decided to move some of the elements that were placed on the platform originally into this case, as well as incorporate a lot of these found objects, also these pigments sourced. And perhaps what I'm most excited about in this piece is her field book. So I thought it was quite generous for her to give up her field book from 1 year, because it's actually her notes. That's her work. And in it records like a whole year of her work in the field, her notes, and the page we decided to keep it open to was about her kind of practices and values around collecting materials in the field, which is a whole nother conversation. And this is just a view of Hilary Mushkin's Incendiary Traces project of some of those collaborative plein air sketches that were conducted at a site at the along the US-Mexico border. This is just a view of painter KB Jones's work. For KB, these plein air sketches are informal works, so not really meant to be finished works most of the time, but they capture the artist's experience of observing and being present in a place of personal significance. At times, the sketches are brought back to the studio where they're further developed or integrated into new paintings. And so Jones's plein air watercolor sketches of the oil and gas industry of the Oklahoma and West Texas area, where her family has roots, are used as references for her large-scale tapestry called Intervention you see there, that colorful pink work. Jones writes, "Rather than depicting the horizontality of the landscape, I layered and stacked images showing a sense of time going down like roots." And so in the cases, you see some of the watercolor sketches done plein air on site of the Permian Basin and surrounding area. And while Jones is working on site, she often will also collect other reference material from the area. In this case, she was working on this body of work when she was in, or at least Intervention, the large painting, when she was in residence at Chinati in Marfa, Texas, in West Texas, and was kind of really influenced by the painter John Wesley, who has a permanent kind of exhibition at that organization. And so you can really see the influence of his work on that work, and some of the imagery, in addition to being kind of informed by the oil and gas industry, is also from objects found around town. Like in particular, this one, some of the imagery comes from this book she found at a thrift store called Alice in Bible Land. So I love this idea. In the original iteration of this show, we were only able to show the study for Intervention because the ceilings weren't tall enough. So it was really nice to, again, be able to revisit what is possible in the each version of the exhibition. And then we have a little peek into Paula Wilson, that's Salty and Fresh, that one you saw. You're seeing the end of that's Paula as the towering sea goddess. Another view of Paula's Salty and Fresh in this iteration. And this is just another view of Susanna Batten's work. So that body of work, Leave No Trace, that we saw earlier. Here we decided to hang the uniforms, and we were able to incorporate other elements, including some of the artist's research and publications from the Bureau of Land Management, as well as what I really was so happy we were able to include, what the artist calls full-size color panels. And so these are actually ready-made paintings painted by the Bureau of Land Management that are they're produced as tools for Bureau of Land Management staff, field agents, to go out and, again, match the color of a certain place with one of these BLM approved colors, kind of like these color charts. And but Susanna found that you could buy them as a regular person as well, and so bought a bunch, and has also had other projects that utilized them in the field. But for this exhibition, we thought it might be nice to display them like monochromatic paintings, because this show is very much about painting. So just shows how these exhibitions shift and evolve. And then we also, I was happy to include another work by Paula Wilson that didn't exist either at the first iteration. And this one is called I Am Painting. And I almost think of it as part 2 to Salty and Fresh, her other video work, where she is kind of just embodying painting. Paula Wilson has said that there is no more powerful sense of place than to be in your body wherever you are standing. And this video work, I Am Painting, offers a glimpse into Wilson's life in Carrizozo, New Mexico, where the artist has shared a studio and home with partner and collaborator Mike Lag since 2007. Art making and landscape are intertwined into daily life, and the artist's painting and landscape literally become one. They meld in this lovely, charming video, which I hope you all get to see sometime. This one actually, I think, is online if you go to Paula's website. And then last for this exhibition, one of the things I was really excited about with a little more space at the Armory was incorporating a reading room. And I kind of think of exhibition making as not that different than, I kind of think of everything I do as almost like a research project or just research. And then sometimes I don't really know the format of a project. It's more about the ideas, at least at the beginning. And so I almost feel like I wish every exhibition could have a syllabus or something. And I think of exhibitions as not that different than courses I design and teach, or, publications or an illustrated presentation, all kind of the result of a lot of different references. And so this was a really exciting way to be able to expand on some of the ideas in the exhibition and also let the reference materials speak for themselves. So I invited each of the artists to contribute some titles. And a lot of the times also, I guess, in part of one of the most enjoyable things about doing studio visits and working with artists to create these exhibitions is the conversations we have. And I'm always taking notes of what books, are informing their thinking. And so to be able to share as much of that as possible with visitors, I feel like it really just adds another layer to the exhibition. And so this is inside, there's a little book plate that shows which artist suggested it. And hopefully you can see some through lines to their work in the exhibition. And then I also contributed my own. And then there's also a shelf that's all kind of kids' books that the Armory staff selected. Education's a huge component of that organization's program. So, okay. And moving on, I'll just go rather quickly through a couple more independent projects just to show kind of the range of things the past few years. This is now I'm going a little backwards, but I worked with a lot of artists when I worked with this organization called High Desert Test Sites, probably over 100 artists over 5 years or so. And it was really wonderful, but a lot of those projects were really temporary and also big group event or exhibition contexts. So with not a lot of support. And it was kind of just like, what can you do? What can we pull off with a lot of, it was very much a DIY kind of approach. And after spending some time with that organization, I decided I wanted to really focus on kind of solo presentations of artist projects. And at a certain point, I think it was, there's a lot of opportunities in Los Angeles, I think, for certain artists who have, been out of school a couple years and a lot of group exhibitions, which is nice, but very few opportunities to have support for a project and develop a significant body of work. And so I was interested in doing that, and I still am. But this is one by an artist named Kristen Posen. And it's called Inverted Dome. It's from last year at the Mack Center for Art and Architecture. And this kind of just started from conversations Kristen and I had. We had been doing studio visits for years, and both shared this interest in domes. I think that came up because we used to have this book club where it was a book club where no one read anything. It was more just like book show and tell, because as you can tell, I just like knowing what everyone's reading. And so anyhow, someone brought in a book about domes, I think, and so that's how that came up. But in it, the resulting exhibition, she reimagines the U.S. Capitol Dome as this inverted, open, and almost unrecognizable structure made of mirror. So it reflects back both the environment and itself. Images of the Capitol Dome are continuously propagated by the media, of all kinds. You know, they're reproduced, endlessly reproduced. And it's almost like the building's image has come to represent structures of power that are otherwise too abstract to locate. And so this room-size installation is a container for holding and focusing light and its refractions, becoming a site for reflection on virtual mediation and transparency. And so this is an exhibition, again, thinking through what can be an exhibition. Does it have to stay in the gallery, or can it have these other kind of tendrils that extend into other spaces and formats? And so this, in addition to the kind of room size installation, involved a sequence of these digital studies that were released online throughout the duration of the show, as well as a publication and public programs that together suggest what kind of spatial and experiential possibilities are there for kind of public architecture, meaning the U.S. Capitol building, and this as kind of a little case study. This was a literal public artwork I worked on with an artist named Tanya Brodsky. And this was a commission for the city of West Hollywood. So this came about because, there are often, at least in Los Angeles, West Hollywood, there are a lot of resources for public art. But I don't know if any of you have tried to apply for one of those call for proposals. It's kind of daunting. And but I thought it was also kind of refreshing. Most of the time when I make exhibits, I'm working with the organization to fundraise. And when I'm working with the artist, I have to, ahead of time, before I have all the money secured, I'm often like, you have a budget between this and this. I'm sorry, I can't tell you exactly what it is yet, but it'll be somewhere in between. And I thought it was so refreshing that with this public art process, you know exactly what budget you're getting ahead of time. And it was also just an interesting exercise it was fairly a transparent process too. The general public is invited to, and you hear the discussions that these arts councils make around your idea, and you can't really respond until it's your turn. But there was something kind of refreshingly transparent about it all, which I appreciated. And so this was a way to realize this idea for this project with an artist I had kind of worked on smaller projects with over the years. And so this was a public installation installed for about 3-4 years in West Hollywood, which this park, Plummer Park, is frequented by a lot of kind of, Tanya described them as kind of Russian grannies and grandpas. And she said it really reminded her of her youth growing up in Kiev. So for this work consists of several large-scale sculptures that are rather playful in their form and have bright colors that evoke a children's playground of the kind ubiquitous during the Soviet era. The sculptures don't quite work as playground equipment, though. Each one is too tall or too short or missing key elements or installed at these kind of absurd or kind of awkward heights and positions to one another. And so the installation, the exhibition's title, Yolki Palki, is a Russian nonsense phrase expressing frustration or alarm, commonly used in lieu of a curse word in front of children. And so this is kind of consistent with some of Tanya's previous work, colorful, minimalist, using these industrial materials and techniques, but also imbued with this humor informed by her Soviet upbringing. And her works often incorporate architectural elements, reimagined in ways that expose and complicate their relationship to the human body, public space, and social conventions that govern both. Okay. So, and I'm gonna, for this talk, I haven't dug out this material in many years, but it got me, it was fun to pull out some old hard drives from when I worked with this organization, High Desert Test Sites, and that was 2011 to 2015. So I worked with hundreds of artists, mostly on temporary interventions again, that were sited in very specific locations, conditions, and communities in the Joshua Tree area, but later expanded beyond to other sites and arid locations in the Southwest. Most of the time they were very scrappy, DIY spirit, very small budgets. And I was kind of tasked to, I was brought into the organization by the artist Andrea Zettel, who co-founded it, to kind of get the organization nonprofit structure and develop programming and kind of run it with her. And I learned a lot, and it was really wonderful getting to work with so many artists. The process was almost more like, not really a curator sometimes, but felt more like maybe a producer or matchmaker even, in that you would hear an artist's idea and then work with them to find a complementary site or condition to realize it. Though at other times, the artist's idea for the work would develop after visiting a site. But I got to work with so many wonderful artists, and I pulled this out because I was realizing all these University of Oregon people I got to work with during that time. Kartz Uchi, some of you probably know, and Jesse Sugarman, who's someone I continue to work with in different capacities, Brooks Deerdorf. So it was kind of a fun to pull these out. And this is a project called, it's an untitled project by the artist Kirsten Pusemp. We would do these big weekend events with a bunch of artists where they'd do different interventions in the immediate Joshua Tree area. And this one I love, it's called it says, if you can't read it, The Bottom of an Ocean of Air. And it was installed on a dry lake bed in Wonder Valley, a community outside of Joshua Tree. So they had some really kind of ephemeral forms, and then sometimes more substantial. This is from that same year, and it's a project called Yucca Crater by Ball Nogues Studio, who kind of is known for these large-scale public art and architecture kind of projects. And this one, they actually were recycling formwork from other public art projects, big ones, to create this elevated crater and aquatic basin that was kind of this nod, this gesture to the suburban swimming pools that they noticed scattered around the Mojave. And it was filled with water that was heated with solar power and actually functioned as a swimming pool for the weekend. Some of these projects, I do think it's, I think of them and I'm like, wow, we did that with like no budget. And this was also 2011 and a lot has changed. And so it's been interesting too, that High Desert Test Sites, I was there 5 years, but Andrea Zettel and the other co-founders really conceived of it as almost an organism. It was meant to evolve and with the times and respond. And so that idea of, I think they've shifted away from that, let's see what we can do with volunteers and a very small budget, and have shifted. So, which I think is healthy and smart. But it's pretty nuts when I think of some of these projects with very little budgets. This was, we would do these immersive outings. We started pushing the physical, like getting outside of the Joshua Tree area. And this was a program I organized called Taking the Waters, in 2014, and it looked at the presence of water and the cultural significance of water in a range of sites. And kind of exploring maybe an exhibition or research project in a itinerary, maybe even. And so this, we see, we're at Zizix. I don't know, does that sound familiar to anybody, Zizix? If you've driven to Las Vegas on I-15, between Las Vegas and Los Angeles, you will note, or a lot of people note, this funny looking road sign that says Zizix. And it was a healing mineral spring, kind of almost retreat center for a time, run by a radio evangelist. Anyhow, but now the Cal State University system maintains it as a desert studies center. But here we see the artist Aaron Schneider giving a guided performative lecture in one of the healing baths at Zizix. This was a project, and you may see familiar faces. I don't know if you've all met Gabby Strong yet, but Gabby's in there as one of the choir members. But this was from an event in 2015. And this one was centered around kind of a week of programs based out of southern Utah. And this time we partnered with an organization called Epicenter, which is based in Green River, Utah. And so this is a project by Kathleen Johnson and Mark So, and it's called Brainchild 3. And it's this kind of science fiction opera. And there are several parts. And each time Johnson kind of collaborates with a different musician or composer to create the soundtrack. And this time it was Mark So. And this narrative follows a girl named Brainchild who discovers the abandoned structures of this ancient civilization and slowly begins to understand her own strange connections to its builders. So part 3 premiered at High Desert Test Sites. And here it is at the Mars Desert Research Station in southern Utah, which is a Mars analog site where Johnson was actually in residence in 2004 to study the landscape and its use in preparing for life on Mars. And this was just another project from that same event from 2015 in southern Utah. And this is a project by the Poussin family called Gamma. And here, Geiger counters are amplified and seating is placed there. And that's it. But it was the setting, again, that made it kind of, I think, compelling to do this gesture. So it was set in Green River, Utah, situated kind of between this Green River uranium disposal cell and the former Green River missile launch complex. So it became this kind of sound installation embedded at the site itself. Okay. So moving ahead, and this is kind of like a different type of project maybe, and I don't know if it's really a curatorial project. It's not an exhibition, at least not yet. But this is called a project I've been doing. I guess I call it a research project called Revisiting Charles Jenks's Daydream Houses of Los Angeles. And so this is something where, I was even reluctant to call it a project, make a project out of it, because it was really something I do for fun. And I think it's really important to have hobbies and do things just for fun and not always have to feel like you have an agenda or a public format for it. This is one of those things. So this book is by Charles Jenks. He was an architectural historian and cultural theorist who passed away pretty recently, just a couple months actually after I delivered this presentation in 2019. But I found this book at the library at the Center for Land Use Interpretation where I work and was just really found it really curious. It's kind of like not quite a coffee table book. It's a paperback put out by Rizzoli, 1978. And there are these snapshots, photos of like kind of everyday houses throughout Los Angeles. But really focusing on these unusual, exaggerated houses that Jenks encountered while driving around Los Angeles. And this was at a time when residential architecture in America was becoming increasingly standardized. So he called attention to these fantasy houses that had been modified or built to exude personal character and variation. A lot of these kind of homemade elements or elements kind of just highly personalized. And so this book includes his kind of almost drive-by photographs. They're very informal photographs or snapshots of about 60 of these excessive and exaggerated houses, paired with his own witty captions and oftentimes an address, so readers could embark on their own house tour, see them themselves. And so I thought this would be, I got an opportunity, an invitation to do something at the Schindler House in West Hollywood, which is kind of one of the neighborhoods that Jenks looks at for his daydream houses. And so I thought, okay, I'll make an illustrated presentations. I love presentations as formats because they're a way you can kind of just share things. Like, I guess you can, I like show and tell. I like just presentations and, you don't have to have it all figured out. Whereas an exhibition, I know I'm trying to push what an exhibition can be, but, somehow the white gallery wall, that context makes it seem like this is finished. Or a book. It's like, this is printed. It's the final word. And so I liked the idea of a presentation. So in it, we kind of considered the informal photograph, the enthusiast, the idea of the tour, and also the changing appearance of our city's residential neighborhoods and the significance of his book now 45 years later. So I've delivered it a couple more times since then, and I think it may be evolving into different formats later, but I just pulled out some of them from the presentation, but in it I really adopt Jenks's original format, actually. Boys Town Variegated, that's what he grouped them into different themes. So that's West Hollywood, which is what it was kind of known as at the time. But then on the left is his photograph from the 70s and his description, and then my contemporary rephotography. So it's just, rephotography can be a really straightforward way of showing change in a place. And, his descriptions, I don't know if you can read them all, but I love that, he says, note the Second Empire lighting, the LA door, and topiary petrol pumps. And so it begins to paint a picture. You see trends in landscaping and architecture, maybe desire for privacy, different things. And as much as when I give the presentation, I just let the images speak as much for themselves as possible, along with Jenks's original words. So here it's spread wing Cadillac with LA door and Henry Moorish, 2450 North Hercules Drive, a surreal mixture of automobile and art imagery with excessive blank windows. The house to the left is almost a Zork. Chinese, I don't know why, with domino door near Hedges Place. The blue color and pattern motifs are quite restful. This is part of a whole section on LA doors. This is also an LA door, bigger door, 326 Lapeer Street. Often the blank off-white wall serves as a backdrop for shadows or planting. And then this was my favorite one, but Ron Tramp's ski jump with mushroom overtones, 8968 Dick Street. The ultimate bungaloid facelift with erotic curves, picturesque windows, and movie star awning. The tiny bell tower by the entrance provides the perfect balance. This gem in Boys Town ought to have a preservation ordered slapped on it. And it's still there, just, behind a hedge fence, as many things are. But, okay. And now I'm going to pivot to another kind of project that kind of shares some similarities with that one. But again, looking at these kind of other people's attempts at, again, documenting the everyday landscape of kind of like ordinary places. And this one was, what you see is a bunch of postcards by Merle Porter. who was a one-man postcard production company based out of Colton, California. And he produced and distributed millions of cards over a 50-year career, which ended when he passed away in 1988. Nearly always about place, his cards celebrated ordinary landscapes, including highways and small town downtowns in the western states, but especially California. He took the photographs you see on the front and wrote descriptive captions for the back of each card, which were full of historical facts and local lore. But sometimes his descriptions took up so much space on the back of the postcard, if you actually wanted to send it with your own message, there was very little room. So this was actually a project that I did with the Center for Land Use Interpretation. And I don't know if I'll be able to get too into my work with the center, but this project has kind of a direct tie-in with some of my personal interests. So this photo you see is from 1999, so before I was involved with the Center for Land Use Interpretation, and it's from the center's first exhibit of Merle Porter's work. It was a show called Territory in Photo Color, and it was organized by Sabrina Merlo, and it featured a total of 20,000 of these cards, including hundreds of distinct postcards designs displayed on these postcard racks. And the postcards were for sale for $1 each, with most of the proceeds going to the Porter family. Since that time, the center has continued to make his cards available for sale to the public, still for $1. As long as they continue to, we will do that in our LA space and shop. But anyhow, these are just some of the images, a sampling of the postcards on the front. And so he distributed and produced these postcards. And I think we have like 668 of them or something in Los Angeles, in our collection. Again, they were just these views of small town downtowns, as well as roadways, other landmarks. They, for the most part, weren't like these big famous, tourist destinations. So places, it was kind of hard to find images of some of these everyday, anonymous or not remarkable buildings at the time. So they range from about the 50s to the 80s when he passed away. It's an interesting thing too, because they're also not great photographs all the time, kind of like the Charles Jenks ones. Sometimes you can tell you can see his shadow, or he's standing in the middle of the street. But the postcards are kind of this immediate and familiar visual record, and then become time capsules with a consistent perspective. And so Jesse Sugarman, I think MFA alumni of this program, who I met from High Desert Test Sites, teaches at Cal State University, Bakersfield, and invited me and the Center for Land Use Interpretation to develop kind of a program, an exhibition program, a teaching program with the art department there last year, or 2021, 2022. And the result was I decided to focus on Merle Porter and this idea of postcards. And so we mounted this exhibition called Timestamps. It's a selection of Merle Porter's California postcards, along with contemporary photographs of the same scenes taken by people involved with the Center for Land Use Interpretation. So rephotography, kind of like the Charles Jenks. For me, it made sense to focus on Merle Porter's California cards here, because it was a campus in the Cal State University system, kind of right in the middle of the state. And so comparing these old postcard views with current views of the same location shows the changes we make to the places we inhabit. Studying them side by side, we span the gap between then and now and unearth surprising, subtle, and revealing patterns of change and stasis. So this is how they were presented in the exhibition. Merle Porter's card mounted on the left, and then the back of it on the bottom, and then our contemporary rephotography on the right. Rephotography or repeat photography can be, again, this effective way of seeing and showing change and the passage of time in the landscape. The process involves researching and locating the original vantage point and location of the original images, and then taking new photographs of them using the same camera positions as much as is possible. While rephotography is concerned with documenting changing landscapes, it's also about the construction of seeing and the production of images, highlighting variations in optics and camera technology, and in the ways in which each photographer's body is situated in the landscape. I noticed I'm much shorter than Merle Porter was. It's kind of impossible for me to get some of his vantage points unless I have like a step stool. So despite our best efforts to create an image identical to the original, each photograph is ultimately unique, a record of an individual's experience in a specific place at a single moment in time. And so this is an exercise, I led the students at CSU Bakersfield in trying to rephotograph Merle Porter's Bakersfield postcards. And as you can see, the original is the first one. There's a wide range, and there was also some days the air quality was terrible in Bakersfield. But it just shows how, I love this idea of bringing it back to the body. Like every photograph was taken by somebody, unless it was taken by like a machine, which is a new thing. But anyhow, so I worked with the students to mount a complimentary exhibition that was called 14 Views of Bakersfield. Informed by Merle Porter's postcards, each artist selected, mapped, and photographed and described 12 places of local or personal significance. Postcards and other forms of distributed media can inform the ways in which we perceive, understand, and remember landscapes. They're like TV or film or magazines or social media, that they can function as a medium for the perpetual kind of distribution and circulation of idealized imagery. Postcards are mass-produced, they're affordable, democratic, and, have been readily available at souvenir shops, which I love. And they can be seen as a precursor to contemporary forms of visual correspondence, such as Instagram or TikTok and text messages. So really that was there was a whole course we built out of that, looking at postcards as this record, as a form of communication that can shape our understanding of a place. And so these 14 artists presented 14 distinct postcard perspectives of Bakersfield today. And they were all kinds of things from, pets to, a favorite coffee shop or grocery store. These were the places that were significant to the students. And so postcards represent these places, but they also represent these relationships between the site, the sender, and the recipient at a distinct moment in time. And so visitors to the exhibition were welcome to take a postcard from the rack to either keep as a memento or mail out to someone. And so I could go on and on and on. I didn't even get into the Center for Land Use Interpretation's work really, but I think maybe that's a good place to stop. It's a little after 5:10, so yeah.